Hey guys, I promised you I'd be going over the practice Canvas quiz, and here it is. So I'll go over all 10 of these questions. Obviously, some of these questions I'm sure you've got right, some maybe you didn't. So I want you to go through and find the ones that you missed, redo the quiz, so that way you can get a 100. So we'll start with number one. What is 25% of 300? Symbolically, 25% is basically 1/4. So that question is, what is 1/4 of 300, which is 300 divided by 4. So you can do 300 divided by 4 to get your answer, which is 25 times 3, right? 100 divided by 4 is 25. Triple that, and you get 75. I embedded the calculator in here so you can have some practice with it. So 300 divided by 4, just press 300 and then hit the slash button where the question mark is, and then do the 4. And then you got it. Now, if you didn't know 25% of 3 was 1/4, you could also do 0.25, and you could multiply that by 300. You can get that multiplication symbol a couple different ways. You can do parentheses. That is multiplication. You can hit Shift 8. That's that little asterisk sign, which is going to give you the multiplication dot. You could also go into the menu down here and do times. So 25% is 0.25. 0.25 times 300 is 75. And then a third way to do it would be to do the 25% of. In Desmos, you can do 25%, Shift 5 will put that percent, and then it'll put of. And when you throw that 300 in there, you can get that 75. So either way, you're going to get 75. Let's look at question 2. Question 2 is asking us to solve the equation negative 4x plus 8 equals 20. Let's remember how to solve equations. We always want to get all the values to one side and the x's to the other side. So in this case, I have this 8 I want to move over. We'll want to subtract that since it's being added. So you're going to have negative 4x equals 20 minus 8, which is going to be 12. And this is negative 4 times x. So we want to divide by negative 4 so we can solve for x. So 12 divided by negative 4 is going to be negative 3. You can check that if you want. You can go back into the calculator and you can type in negative 4 and plug in negative 3 here. Use parentheses, and that's going to multiply to 12. And then if you do plus 8, that'll get you back up to 20. So going back and plugging it in to make sure it works is always a good option, especially when you have a calculator at your disposal. Number 3. Number 3 starts the same way, but it's equal to an expression that's not a value. It's equal to expression as an x term. So we have negative 4x plus 8 equals negative 2x. Now when I'm doing this problem, I want to get the x's to one side and have the numbers to the other. I would add the 4x to both sides. That'll cancel out those 4x's there, and that's going to leave me with 8. Negative 2 plus 4 is 2, so 8 equals 2x, and then I can divide both sides by 2 to figure out what x is equal to. So 8 divided by 2 is going to be 4. 4 is going to be equal to x. We can go back and we can plug that in as well. So I could say on the left side of my equation, by plugging that 2 in, or that 4 in, excuse me, I could say negative 4 plus negative 4, or negative 4 times 4 plus 8. Well, does that equal negative 2 times 4? Well, let's see. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16 plus 8 is going to be negative 8. So we can verify that, of course. Negative 4 parentheses 4 plus 8 is negative 8. Then go back here and do negative 2 times 4. And that also gives you negative 8. So both sides of the equation, you get the same thing when you plug in 4. So that way you know 4 is going to be your answer. All right, let's look at number 4. Solve the equation by graphing. Many equations can be solved this way. So this equation, we don't have the methods to solve this by hand. In fact, I don't know how to solve this by hand. It's actually designed to be graphed and estimated. So when you're solving an equation using graphing, which by the way, you can do your other equations like this as well, you want to do one side of your equation into the first line of Desmos. And then you want to do the other side into your other line in Desmos. You can't put this whole thing together because it's going to give you an error message. But to go into Desmos down here, you put the 3x cubed. So to get 3x cubed, I do 3x and to raise to a power, excuse me. I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to hit 6. Shift 6 is going to give you that caret symbol. And that's going to allow you to put a 3 in the exponent. You can also use your keypad down here, hit the A to the B, and do the 3 as well. Hit the right arrow, get back to the main line and do minus 2x plus 5. So now you have your graph here. You can see that that's a cubic function. It's got this curve, goes down, goes back up. And then in the next line, leaving this in here, you do 1 divided by 2, 1/2, right arrow, x, 1/2 x. And then we want to go back and we want to look, where do those graphs meet each other? And they meet at that coordinate negative 1.417, comma, negative 0.709. Now the answer to this question is the negative 1.417 because we're looking for the value of x. So if I plugged in negative 1.417 raised to the third power minus 2 times negative 1.417 plus 5. And then I did 1 divided by 2, right arrow, negative 1.417. You see both sides of the equation will give you about negative 0.7. So we know that's right by plugging it in. So that x value is going to be your answer to this equation, negative 1.417. So we didn't really have to do any work by hand on that one. Let's look at question number 5. For the function f of x equals 2x squared plus 8x minus 4, what is f of negative 3? So what that means for function notation is we want to plug in negative 3 for whatever values of x you see. So we have 2x squared, that means 2 times negative 3 squared, plus 8x, so 8 times negative 3, minus 4. That's what f of negative 3 is. So order of operation, if we're doing this by hand, order of operations would give you 2 times, we got to do the exponent, so negative 3 squared is positive 9. Remember, negative squared is negative times a negative, so it's positive. 8 times negative 3 is minus 24, minus 4, and then this is going to be 18. So 18 minus 24, minus 4. And if you just subtract these two, 18 minus 24 is negative 6, minus 4 is going to give you negative 10. So that's doing it by hand. And then we can also use our calculator if we'd rather not do that by hand by doing, just basically doing this right here. 2 parentheses negative 3, shift 6 squared, plus 8 parentheses negative 3, minus 4. And there's your negative 10. But I propose a different way to do this as well, and that's using the f of x notation. With that, you would do f parentheses x equals 2x squared plus 8x minus 4. So you would just type in the function without plugging in any numbers, but having the f of x there. So that allows you to go back and go to a new line and say f of negative 3. But the beauty of this is you can plug in any number. So you could say f of negative 3, f of 2, f of 20. Doesn't matter, right? And so some of the harder numbers to plug in, some of the bigger numbers, that'd make this way easier. It's basically like looking at a table. So you can utilize your f features in Desmos to get your answer as well. So your answer is negative 10. Question 6. Evaluate 1/3 divided by 1/12. Conceptually, 1/3 divided by 1/12 looks like this. Let's say you got a whole. You separate that into thirds, right? This is 1/3. Now take that same whole and separate that into 12s. One-12th is just one of those little guys, right? So how many of those go into 1/3? So 1/3 divided by 1/12. Let's see, I can do 1, 2, 3, 4 goes into 1/3. So 1/3 divided by 1/12 is equal to 4. Conceptually, that's what that looks like. So mathematically, we can kind of go back and do the actual number crunching by saying 1/3 divided by 1/12 is the same as saying 1/3 multiplied by 12 over 1. We can flip that. It's keep, change, flip, if you remember, which is going to be 12 divided by 3, which is going to be 4. So that's doing that by hand. Now, if you want to divide fractions in the calculator, here's how you do that. You first throw in the fraction bar. All right, you press the division sign first. All right, then that pulls up the overall fraction. On the numerator, the top part of that fraction, you can do 1/3, 1/3 on the top. Press the down arrow, and then you can do 1/12, and that'll give you 4. 1/3 divided by 1/12 is going to equal 4. So conceptually, by hand, and then in the calculator, I'll give you 4. All right, let's look at number 7. Number 7, we have another function. We want to know what is g of 2. Again, we're going to plug in a number. So g of 2 will look like negative 2 parentheses. We're plugging in 2 here. So negative 2 times 2 squared minus 5 times 2 plus 1. And then we're going to divide that all by 2 times 2 minus 5. 2 times 2 minus 5. So by hand, of course, we want to figure all that out, which is negative 2 times 4, which is negative 8, minus 10, negative 8, minus 10, plus 1. That's negative 18 plus 1, which is negative 17. That's your numerator. And your denominator is 4 minus 5. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. Negative 17 divided by negative 1 is positive 17. We can go over to here. We could type this in, or let's use the g of x notation. So g parentheses x equals, and throw that fraction bar in first so you can see the division sign. Then we can do negative 2x squared minus 5x plus 1. You just throw that in there. There's a 2x minus 5. Now that we have our function, we can go in and do g of 2. So g parentheses 2, which is going to give you 17. So that's the same thing as saying taking this expression and plugging in 2. In fact, I'll show you here. Just a little bit quicker, but can be done. Of course, we can get our 17 that way as well. But again, I really like the function feature on Desmos, so I utilize this feature a lot more than I would here if I'm doing this in Desmos. The answer is going to be 17. 17. All right, we're getting close to being done. Thank you for your patience. Number 8. Oh, it's the square root of 154. So a cool way to do square roots in the calculator. I think most of you know how to do a square root in your calculator, but what you might not know is the square root of 154. Obviously, that's going to be between two numbers. It's not a whole number, because if you remember, 12 squared is 144, and if you don't know, 13 squared is 169. So it's going to be between those two numbers, 12 and 13. So to get the square root of that number as a decimal, you have a couple options. You can go back into here, you can do the square root symbol and just do 154, and you see it's 12.4. But I use the keyboard shortcut. So I type in the letters SQRT, no spaces, SQRT, throws in the square root symbol, and then we can type in the number inside there, and that's going to get you your 12.4 that way. Okay, 2 more questions. Number 9. Number 9 is asking, what are the zeros of the quadratic expression? X squared minus 4x plus minus 12. Zeros are what number? In other words, when x equals some number, then y equals 0. Those are zeros. And they have several names. Zeros, we call them roots. We call them x-intercepts. Sometimes they're just called solutions, but either way, those are your zeros. And to get those zeros, there's a couple of techniques we can do by hand. By hand, we'd want to factor that. So if I'm taking x squared minus 4x minus 12, I want to think about two expressions that could multiply to get that. They both have to start with x, because x squared is x times x is x squared. But then you have to break down the negative 12. So you can break down 12 a couple different ways, right? You can say 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. But only one of those ways is going to also give you two numbers that can combine to give you negative 4. And that's going to be when the 6 is negative and the 2 is positive, right? So if I say minus 6 plus 2, then I can check and make sure that those combine to give you that. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is plus 2x. Negative 6 times x is minus 6x. And negative 6 times 2 is minus 12. Of course, that's a minus, not a positive. And those will combine to give you negative 4x. So x squared minus 4x minus 12 will get you right back into there. So what's the significance of that? Well, if I want to know my zeros, I can set those equal to 0 and solve both of those expressions. So I could also say x minus 6 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0. So looking at these two expressions, the only way that's going to work is if x is equal to positive 6 and x is equal to negative 2, because they got to cancel each other out to give you zeros. Graphically, what that's going to look like is putting in x squared minus 4x minus 12. X squared minus 4x minus 12. And on the graph, we can see where it crosses the x-axis. -2, +6. -2, +6 are your zeros. In other words, when I plug in -2, 4, +8, -12, that's 0. And when I plug in 6, 36 -24, -12. Both of those give you 0. Those are your zeros of the function. I know that might have been a bit overkill, but I wanted you to see all the different methods that, and those aren't even all of them, but several different methods to allow you to get the same answer, because I'm big on you getting the answer in whatever way works for you. Our last question is number 10. It's dealing with absolute values, which is going to be more what we do next unit, but this is a good preview. We have a function, f of x equals -3x plus 1. These are your vertical bars. They mean absolute value. Absolute value means that whatever you get inside of the absolute value, it's going to always give you positive. So the absolute value of -8 is going to be 8. The absolute value of 8 is going to be 8. It's always going to be positive, always positive. So what does that mean when I plug in multiple things in an absolute value? The absolute value of -3x plus 1. Well, if I'm plugging in 2, then I have to do the absolute value of -3 times 2 plus 1. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to change that negative to anything, because we have to evaluate the stuff in here before we can actually change the sign. So always do what's inside the group first, and then complete the absolute value work to get your final answer. So this is going to be -6 plus 1 that's going to be -5. But remember, that's the absolute value of -5. So it's going to actually be +5. +5. So finally, one last thing to show you how to get absolute values on the graph. The absolute value of -3x plus 1. So let's say I type in the entire expression, f of x equals, to get the absolute value, you can go back into your keyboard here and do this bar right here, absolute value bars. I forgot my equal sign, so let me put that in. But anything you put inside those vertical bars is considered absolute value. So you could do -3x plus 1, and then click out of here and to close that up automatically. Great. So that's the absolute value of that. That's your function. Notice that's a V shape. But how can I type that in? So f of x equals, to get the absolute value, if you hold down the shift button and the button above the enter, it'll put that vertical bar, and you can type in -3x plus 1, and just do shift enter again, close that up. There's another way to do absolute value. So now I can say f of, what was it, 2? And that's going to give you 5. So just kind of to recap here, the absolute value of -3 times 2, well, that's 6, right? Because it's -6, and the absolute value of that is +6. But if I add 1, that's -5. But the absolute value of -5 is +5. So your answer is going to be 5 for that. Well, that concludes the entirety of that practice Canvas quiz. And like I said before, if you've done it and you did not get all of them right, go back and redo it and make sure that you put in the correct answers. And now that you've watched this video and you kind of see how to do those, hopefully in the future, it'll make some of our Desmos calculations a little bit easier. I appreciate you watching. You're going to have a great semester, and stick with me, and we will do good things in this class.